Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
I want to welcome you back to a very special episode of the Dental Wealth Podcast. When I started this podcast, the idea was to show the independent dentist how to thrive. I felt like there was a huge lack, and the lack was that so many people were showing you how to invest outside of the dental practice, but nobody was showing you how to invest inside. And it's such an amazing asset. It just was the idea that the independent dentist really didn't have tools to do that was, for me, a passion point, a place where I said, I've got to put some emphasis and go help these independent dentists. And so over that time, I've aligned myself with people who have the same mission, who believe in the same purpose. There is a lot of private equity coming into this field, into the industry of dentistry. And so as private equity comes in, it changes the marketplace. And we're going to talk about that today, but it changes the marketplace. It changes the field. And so my special guest today has worked hard and is working hard to level that playing field, to give the independent dentist ways that they can thrive and compete in this marketplace and the marketplace that's coming and evolving. And Trevor Maurer, I've gotten to know him over the last few years, and every time I'm with him, we have just these amazing conversations. I know you're going to really enjoy him on this podcast today. I mean, this is a person who is with Procter & Gamble and raised to the top of that sales arm there, who, in a very short period of time, he's been the CEO of venture capital and private equity funded healthcare companies. He's got such a great knowledge base and brings it to the field of dentistry. So him being the CEO of SmileSource is such a great guest to have on because he brings such an amazing perspective. And I know that you'll enjoy our time with him today. SmileSource is a company that I've gotten to know. I don't have an affiliation with SmileSource in regards of we don't have I don't get paid for having him on the podcast. I want to say that out loud because I want people to know, look, this podcast is meant to find people in the marketplace that I know can help you. And if we're going to, be passionate about helping the independent dentist, then we've got to look at ways we can be successful. And will tell you that spending time around SmileSource doctors, I've always been impressed with the chemistry within the organization, the passion with the organization, what they do for the independent dentists. And I think you're going to learn more and you're going to love hearing our special guest today. So I'm going to introduce him now. I hope you enjoy. Take this in. This is awesome. Trevor, I want to thank you for being here. As I said, Trevor Maurer is the CEO of SmileSource, and I can't thank you enough for being here. Thank you for your time, Trevor.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I want to just jump right in, and for the people listening, I want to talk about SmileSource, but before I do that, I really would like to talk about a conversation you and I had recently, which is really where is the industry going? And I think so many of the people listening to this are constantly having that conversation. What's happening in the industry? Where's the movement in the industry? I know that I believe that SmileSource plays a huge role in that, but I'd like to kind of get your thoughts about where the industry is heading and just some overall kind of thoughts around that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. I think you've seen tremendous investment in dentistry by capital from outside of dentistry. And what's happening is investors are realizing that dentistry is a great investment, right? Sometimes more than our own dentists realize that it's a great investment. I know that's what you work so hard to convey. So I want to, share with you that we think in 10 years it's going to land that 2/3 of dentists are going to be employees, right?
Wow.
So one third of dentists, 1/3 of practices will be owned by dentists, but 2/3 will not. Said a different way. And the reason is, and we talked about this, is that there's so much more private equity today than there was, 15, 20 years ago when the Sarbanes Act was passed, making it more stringent for public companies to report their financial records. Half of the companies just went private. So the money is still there. It's just invested differently. And when you invest with private equity, you invest in bigger chunks. So those pools of money are looking for larger assets to buy. So you roll up 10, 20, 50, 100 dental practices, right in the sweet spot for acquisition by these private equity funds. And dentistry has become very attractive. It's very not simple, but it's a good industry for consolidation. And you know, I don't think anybody can argue that. You know, our numbers are 20% are already consolidated in the U.S., and that's going to go to 2/3 in 10 years.
That's incredible. It's interesting. I don't know if I shared with you, I was up in Manhattan recently, and I was talking to a large investment house, and they were asking me the numbers on a dental practice as far as profitability and risk rate. And when I told them, you know, where the risk was, and we start talking about, depending on how they set up this practice, you know, they can look at, you know, 12, 15, 20+% depending on how it's managed and what the structure looks like. And then the risk rate of a dental practice, you started to see these eyes get huge, and and the room started kind of lighting up, because when they think about what a great investment a dental practice is, and they look at the overall marketplace, there is a tremendous amount of return with low risk. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. You've got you know, what could become skilled labor, highly skilled labor, that's invested a tremendous amount in their education, and very rarely do they exit dentistry, right? They may exit ownership, but they want to stay in dentistry because that's the skill that they've invested so much money in and time that they're going to stick around and work for somebody.
This 2/3 of people that where do you see that moving? So 1/3 of them are owned by dentists, and then you see the 2/3 basically moving. Those people are going to work under these giant, maybe giant's the wrong term, but corporations, consolidated corporations. Is, you know, people are going to come out of school and you see them kind of moving towards those type of operations.
Yeah, so I'll validate that a little bit, other than just throwing a dart, right? Because it kind of sounds like I made the number up if I start with the end. But I think it's important to get that out front, so the people that are listening are interested to figure out why we think this is happening, right? If you look at, you know, Malcolm Gladwell, I read his book, The Tipping Point, and once something hits a certain percentage of a trend, then it starts to accelerate. And dentistry is right there at 20%. So what we're seeing in terms of consolidation, according to Gladwell, in The Tipping Point, dentistry should start to accelerate. So if you look at that math, that puts us at 2/3 consolidation in 10 years. There's a bunch of other math. If you look at the decline in practice ownership, right from the ADA, right? This is all public. You can Google private practice ownership declining ADA, and you'll find it, right? It was for the under 35s, and I'm looking at the under 35 group because that's, you know, the future of dentistry. Is in 2005, 44% of them owned a practice, and today it's less than 28%. If you look at solo practice, in the year 2000, it was 2/3 of practices were solo, and today it's less than 50%. If you look at student debt, $287,000 is the 2018 estimate for student debt, and all they're hearing in the schools from the DSOs, whether they're mid-market DSOs, which are the fastest growing group of DSOs, or the large nationals like Heartland and Aspen, what they're hearing is, hey, you're never going to service that debt if you buy a practice. So just come work for me. I'll pay you more than anybody else, and we'll help you pay that debt down. Now, what I disagree, what they don't know or they don't believe is that's good debt. And banks will lend against the practice. They buy an existing practice, banks will lend against it because they've invested in a skill, right? Now, if you buy a Corvette or a Lamborghini or a beach house, that's bad debt. Banks are not going to want to lend for you to buy a practice. So you've got this high debt load, and then you've got, you know, research that less than 10% of graduating students want to own a practice, right? So that all lines up. So if you look at those data points plus one more, we do a survey of a few different groups at Smilesource. We survey our leadership, our 55 leaders that these are dentists that are out across the country that run local groups. You can equate it, if you're not familiar with SmileSource, you can equate it to these dentists run local study clubs focused on your practice. It's not clinical. Once in a while, they'll have a clinical CE course, but every month or two in the market, they have a meeting where you bring your issues from your practice and work on them together with peers that you trust, and go back and implement the solution and report back at the next meeting your progress. So it's this peer advisory board. So those administrators believe that over half of practices will be affiliated by 2030. The ADA, if you just look at their graphs, this is not their statement, just look at their data and straight line it with no acceleration as the tipping point would suggest we should add. If you straight line it, it's 2028 when over half of dental practices are affiliated. If you look at the ADSO data, which is the Association for DSOs, 2026 is their data. And then when I survey our top 25 industry presidents and executives of the manufacturers and suppliers and labs that support us, they're the ones that are out meeting with all the DSOs, and they understand their resources and their growth plans. That data comes back as 2025. And it all makes sense when you look at where are dentists practicing right now. Mm-hmm. There's a group called Dykema. They're the premier law firm for DSOs in the US. They do, in my opinion, most of the DSO work. And their research confirms that dentists that are under the age of 35, 60% of them are affiliated with a DSO.
Wow.
So they're already there. It's just going to take time to migrate, right? So, our kind of rallying cry is a Jack Welch statement. Whether you like Jack Welch or not, this is a great statement. He says, change before you have to. So for you independent dentists out there that are doing great or think you're doing great, this might be a good time to reflect and say, what's the market doing? Because the market is changing and I'm not. Where am I going to be in 10 years? And you might be perfectly fine, or you might be able to make a change to your business model and be even better than you could be, or better than you are now.
Well, and that's why when I've spent time with you, and it's always exciting to be around and having these conversations, I think one of the things I look at is, all right, well, there's an independent dentist out there who's listening to this message, and part of it's like, I can see where the trend's coming, and you say, change before you have to. So I know we both are really passionate about supporting the independent dentist and how do we help them maximize their business. So then what is the change that these dentists need to start looking at? And I know SmileSource plays, such a role in, such a big role in that. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about that change, or maybe what are the changes that independent dentists need to start looking at now?
Sure. So I'll start with a very basic statement that there's power in numbers. There always has been, right? That's why there's alliances. It's why there's gangs, right? There's power in numbers. So the independent dentist by himself or herself does not have the power of 1,000 dentists that are loosely marching in the same direction. And I say loosely because in the SmileSource model, we can't and also don't want to force people to do anything, but we will share best practices and give guidance for the way to be the most profitable that you can be and enjoy dentistry the most that you can, right? So our average dental practice is $80,000 more profitable than before they joined SmileSource for two reasons. One is the easiest thing to do when you're aligned as a group is to buy together, right? There are choices when you buy consumables and labs and equipment. There are definitely choices. If you will limit those choices to great companies like Dentsply and DSG Labs and Microdental and CavoCur, I mean, these are all big brand names. We're not importing off-label cheap products, right? These are all things that you've learned to use in school and have experience with. If you'll do that, you'll save 3 points of your 100% of production numbers. So if you're $1 million practice, you're going to save $30,000 a year just by buying on our formula because we've negotiated pricing and our doctors tend to follow it, right? So as an independent dentist, would you rather choose whether or not you own a practice or what dealer you buy your composite from, which is more important to you, right? If you're willing to give on, okay, I can buy from a SmileSource authorized dealer, but I'm going to have a more profitable practice and it's going to be around for my children when they go through dental school, I'll make that choice instead of being told you have to work Saturday, you got to paint the walls yellow, and you got to do a TV ad, and you got to do all the stuff that maybe you don't want to do, but you have to because now you're going to play, right? And the second piece of that is our practices are $50,000 a year more profitable because our growth rate exceeds the industry growth rate by 5% annually. And we do that a number of reasons. One is we identify great partners like you, and when we find things like Tower Leadership or great way to use cone beam or sleep dentistry, right? We pump it into our practices as something they need to really take a hard look at so that they can help to grow their practice and enjoy what they do, right? People like to win. And so when you're in your practice and you're having a bad month and your cash is tight and you might not make payroll or whatever the issues are, who do you go to for advice? You don't go to your staff because then they all quit, right? You're not going to make payroll or whatever the issues are. Sometimes you don't go to your spouse because you don't want to bring that stress home. Sometimes you don't have a hired consultant on the payroll. So who do you go to? You don't go to your competitor down the street to start stealing your patients. At SmileSource, we give you these protected trade areas where you're the only one in the market, and you meet regularly and you go to each other for advice because you've been there. And somewhere in our 1,000 dentist network, someone's been through what you've been through. It's amazing what we find at these peer mastermind meetings where we talk about the issues. We've found people, we've helped them realize they're being stolen from. We've helped them make staff choices. We've helped them make hiring choices. We've helped them decide to buy another practice or not, right? Like going through this peer mastermind process. And that's the real magic of what we have, is this really strong community. The community is not something you just join. Community is something you do.
And Trevor,
you get involved in this community. Go ahead.
Speak to that just for a second. It's interesting. I travel all over the nation. I meet with so many groups, and I'm literally in front of doctors all the time. It seems like I'm always in front of a group. It seems like every day. And one of the reasons that I became so connected with SmileSource and love being around your doctors and love being around the group is because, and I've said this, and I'll say it here or any other platform, what you're saying is 100% correct. When you get around SmileSource doctors, I always tell people it's different, and I always use the word "they get it," and there's so much power in that, so much power in what you're saying, because having that resource and having that group, I think when people look at the number side, there's a huge number side to this, which is the quantitative side, the science of the business, and being able to increase profit and increase growth, which are such huge parts of competing in this marketplace. I think there's the other side, which is the art of the business, right? You need to master both with the qualitative side, being able to call somebody and have those conversations and have that network and have the resources around you. When you put those together, I think that's why, to me, there's so much magic in what you guys do, is because having a community of people who get it, and then also resources with it, so that you can get advantages in the marketplace and you can compete against these larger groups. To me, that's why I'm so glad to have you here today, is because I think people need to hear this message and realize there are resources for you that are out there. You're not all alone on an island. So I love what you guys are doing, because I love being part of your groups. I just want to speak to that. It's 100% true what you're saying. Your community is amazing, and they definitely talk to each other.
It's interesting to see these folks walk around at our dental meeting, right? Because when I came into dentistry, I would go to these national state meetings, and everybody that I talked to was killing it. They're all getting 500 new patients a month. They're all driving brand new cars, right? Everybody's killing it. And then when you peel back the onion a little bit, you realize some of that's just for show, right? And I think what you find with our dentists are folks that they've made a conscious choice to change, right? They're fine on their own. Our average practice is $1.2 million, right? And very high utilization of technology, right? And so we have great practices, but they're that way because they're the type of dentist that's inclined to say, hey, I want to learn from you. And also, I'm really good at this thing that I want to help you with. So our meeting is literally docs walking around going, hey, what's up? How you doing? What can I help you with? Anything? You know what? I'm kind of struggling with this. Maybe you can help me too. And it's kind of this honest meeting where everybody's excited because there's no BS, and they're really just trying to help each other.
I completely agree. So is there an ideal, we talk about the average practice. Is there an ideal practice that's situated perfectly for SmileSource, or is there a certain, should I be looking at if I'm a certain size, or what's ideal for SmileSource if someone's interested?
So it's a great question, and we get asked it all the time. So the qualification for SmileSource is two things. So we ask when somebody wants to join, right? They reached out to us or to an administrator, one of our local dentists, or somehow they find us and they want to join. We ask our group a couple of questions. We ask our group that's already established, would you refer a patient to this dentist? Because if you wouldn't refer to them, if you think they're not a good dentist, we don't want them in the group, right? Because other patients move around, and the U.S. population is quite mobile. As they move around, we refer within network. So when they move from Louisville to Cincinnati, they stay at a SmileSource office, right? So would you refer to them is number one, most important criteria. And number two is, do you trust them? You're going to be in meetings with them, and you're going to share very personal things, business and at home, potentially. It depends upon how tight the group gets with this dentist. And do you trust them? Or are they going to, break the confidentiality rule, and or when you talk about your great staff member, are they going to try to steal them? So if you get through those two, all the other stuff comes along.
I love that. And I want to say for anyone, also, I have become a huge advocate of SmileSource. And, there's, just because I love what you guys are doing with your doctors. And I love that there's competing in the marketplace. When I talk to doctors, this is the Dental Wealth Podcast. The idea of this is be able to use a practice, to be able to invest in your practice, to be able to create scalability, to have a practice that in a sense can run without you having to be there. Whether you want to have single location, multi-location, multi-doctor, the idea of this is so that you can be competitive in the marketplace, which is why that I think this is such a great resource. And Trevor, I really appreciate you being on here today, because I think this is something people need to hear, and people need to know that there are resources that are out there that can help them get to the next level, can help them move their practice, can give them advantages in the marketplace. If someone's interested in SmileSource, so they hear this and they say, gosh, this is something I want to learn more about, what do they need to do to get connected maybe with someone in their area, or how do they get connected with SmileSource?
So I guess, easily, send me an email. I'll refer to someone in my group. My marketing team is going to probably tell me I'm crazy, put my email out there, but you can find it on our website. So it's just T-Maurer, which is T-M-A-U-R-E-R at smilesource.com, and I'll get it in the hands of the right person. Or go to our website, click on doctors, and then there's some videos on there. You can learn more about us. But if you go to smilesource.com, doctors, and then join us, there's a page of information also where you can put your contact info in. One of our business development team will see if you are good for us and if we are good for you.
Well, I'm going to wrap up with one thing that you said, and I want to go back to because I think it's a strong note to end on, which is change before you have to. I think that what a great thing to put out there, and what great quote to bring, because I think you and I know for a fact, are passionate about getting independent dentists to realize this, that change before you have to. Don't wait for the wave to hit you. Great businesses get out in front. I always tell people, don't compete, dominate. Don't just look at what everyone around you is doing in the marketplace and say, well, I'll just copy what they're doing. What you want to do is look in your marketplace and say, how can I have an advantage in the marketplace? How can I do something in my marketplace that would give me a step up? And I certainly think what you guys do gives people a step up. So Trevor, thank you so much for taking the time. I know how busy you are. I really appreciate you being here today. We'll put also some information with the podcast as well if people want to reach out. So I'll put that with the information. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for being such a great partner to SmileSource. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I'm glad you had a chance to listen to Trevor. I'm glad we had the time to get both of our calendars together. The message I want to leave you with, and I want you to think about this, and I think Trevor hit it home, which is the marketplace is changing. When we look at this in this idea of changing before you have to, There are so many companies, and I would say the landscape of industry is literally littered with companies who decided to not adapt, not to change. Even Walmart finds itself in a situation where they're trying to now catch up to what Amazon built. We look at companies like Toys R Us, and we look at large names who, you can look at Kodak and Encyclopedia Britannica, and we could keep going on, Blockbuster, and all these names of these companies that refuse to adapt, they refuse to change. And we sit at a time in dentistry when so many people are not changing, and it seems like in some ways are not willing to adapt and change. And they know the wave is coming and they can feel there's a change in the marketplace, but yet do nothing to change. And then when they go to answers, to get answers to what's happening, they typically go to their circle of people in the same position. I was just in front of a large group of dentists, and I said, if you were trying to cross a river and on one side you had the people that were trying to get across, and the other side you had the people that were across, who would you ask the information, right? Who would you ask how to get to the other side? So many people ask the people that are on the same side of them what they should do or what they think is happening. And if they knew that they wouldn't be trying to get across to the other side, right? And so what I tell you that, and why it's so important to know that, is to know that there are things you have to do in a marketplace to adapt in any market, whether it be dental or other industries. And so I'm glad Trevor was here. Whether it's SmileSource or other organizations, Tower Leadership, we're advocates of the independent dentist. We're trying to help you, invest within a dental practice and learn how to do that so that you don't compete, but you dominate in the marketplace. The same thing with SmileSource. They're putting themselves in a situation where they're trying to help you dominate in the marketplace and not just compete. So you have to align yourself with organizations that are allowing you to use scalability, to use large buying power, to able to compete with the purchasing power of large organizations. And so I'm glad you tuned in today, but I'm going to tell you, listening to this podcast, do something about it. I would encourage you to reach out, find out how it can help you, find out how maybe Tower Leadership can help you, find out how organizations, put together this power group of advisors that can help you take your practice to the next level and truly change before you have to. What a great thing that Trevor left us with. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hit subscribe. We're going to have so many great guests on, and definitely Trevor is a great guest. Hope you enjoyed. We will talk to you soon.